I wasn't invited to my high school reunion where my bullies planned to mock me again. They'd called me trash for years. At the event, one sneered, "Still a nobody, huh?" I handed them my business card, CEO of the company they all worked for. Their jaws hit the floor. Reunions were for people who wanted to relive their glory days. For people who had good memories, who had friends. For people who weren't me. I didn't need an invitation to know I wouldn't be welcome. Not that I expected one. High school had been a battlefield, and I'd been the designated loser. Trash. Worthless. Nothing. Those were their words, not mine. And those words had followed me, branded into my skin like invisible scars. So when I heard about the reunion through social media, I scrolled past the overly excited posts and fake nostalgia. But then I saw something that made me stop cold. A comment thread. My name. Over and over. Think he'll show? Doubt it. Losers don't get invites. Man, I wish he would. Would be fun to remind him who he really is. And then the final comment that clenched my fists so tight my knuckles turned white. Some people don't change. He's still nobody. Always will be. I wasn't angry. Not really. More amused. Because while they've been busy playing kings and queens of their tiny, insignificant world, I've been building something bigger than they could ever imagine. They thought I was a nobody. I was about to remind them exactly who I was. The reunion was being held at some upscale venue downtown. I pulled up in my car, sleek, black, expensive. The kind of car that turned heads. And it did. I saw them through the glass doors, laughing, drinking, wrapped in nostalgia. A room full of ghosts, and I was walking straight into their haunt. I stepped inside. Conversations dulled. Heads turned. Recognition dawned, followed quickly by sneers, smirks, and whispers. And then he saw me. Ryan Lawson. The worst of them. The one who had made sure I never forgot I was beneath him. The self-proclaimed king of high school, standing there with the same smug expression he'd worn back then. Except now, it had the weight of years behind it. Wrinkles forming at the corners of his mouth, a little less hair, but still the same arrogance. His lips curled. Well, if it isn't our old friend. Friend. What a joke. I didn't flinch, didn't react. Just let him talk. Because he would. He always did. He looked me up and down, pretending to assess. Still the same, huh? Figured you'd be, I don't know, working night shifts at a gas station or something. A few chuckles. Encouraging. Feeding his ego. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small, polished rectangle, and held it out to him. He took it lazily, barely interested, until his eyes landed on the name at the top. His face was drained of color. CEO of the company he worked for. The silence was deafening. The smirk on his face? Gone. I let it sink in. Let them all absorb it. Then I smiled. Still a nobody. Ryan's expression flickered between disbelief and something else. Something uglier. You're joking. I shrugged. Check your pay stub. My name's on it. Someone in the crowd let out a low whistle. Another stifled a laugh. It spread, murmurs, side glances, the subtle shifting of power. The king wasn't a king anymore. And he knew it. He forced a smile, but I could see the tension in his jaw. So what? You got lucky. Bet you're still the same pathetic kid underneath. There it was. That desperate need to put me back in my place. I'll let my silence answer for me. But then, someone else spoke. A voice I hadn't heard in years. Ryan, stop. My chest tightened. Emily. She had been different. Kind once. Back when we were kids. Before high school had forced us into categories. Before she had chosen a side. She was staring at me now. Eyes searching, as if trying to recognize the person standing in front of her. You knew about this? She asked Ryan. Voice sharp. Ryan scoffed. Knew what? That the janitor became a CEO? I clenched my jaw. If I remember correctly, your department just had layoffs, didn't it? Ryan's face twisted. A direct hit. Because yes, his department had. And I'd signed off on it. Not out of revenge. Just business. But it felt poetic in a way. A muscle in his jaw twitched. You think you're better than us now? I met his gaze. I don't think so. I know. The air was thick. The room divided. Some watched with amusement. Some with curiosity. And some, like Emily, with something closer to regret. But Ryan? He was watching with something else entirely. Hatred. And that was when I realized this wasn't over. The reunion dragged on, filled with forced laughter and the occasional side glance my way. Ryan had retreated, but I could feel his presence like a storm cloud on the horizon. Then, near the bar, I overheard something that sent ice through my veins. So he doesn't know? Ryan's voice. Low. Hushed. A pause. Then another voice, one I didn't recognize. No. And if he finds out, it's over. I stilled. Find out what? I stepped closer, blending into the crowd. Ryan's voice again, sharper now. I don't care what it takes. That company should have been mine. Mine. My pulse pounded. This wasn't just about high school pettiness. This was something else. Something bigger. I turned, scanning the room. The faces around me blurred. The walls felt tighter, the air heavier. There was more to this story, and I was about to find out what. The ice in my glass had melted, leaving behind watered-down bourbon and the bitter taste of memories. But my focus wasn't on the drink, it was on Ryan. His hushed conversation had sent my mind spiraling, connecting dots I hadn't even known existed. That company should have been mine. Those words weren't just arrogance. There was something else, something dangerous. I turned back toward the bar, my reflection staring at me from the mirror behind the liquor shelves. What didn't I know? I needed answers. Emily caught up to me first. Her eyes held something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe, or curiosity. "You okay?" she asked softly. I tilted my head. "That depends." She frowned. "On what?" I took a slow sip of my drink, watching Ryan from across the room. He was smiling, laughing, playing the perfect role. But I'd seen it, the crack in his mask. "On how much you know," I said. Emily's fingers tensed around her glass. That was enough to answer. "Ryan's hiding something," I said, voice low. "And from that conversation I just overheard, it has to do with my company." She looked away. "It's complicated." I gave a humorless laugh. "Everything always is." Her eyes flickered to mine. And then, after a long moment, she sighed. "There were rumors," she admitted, "back when your company was first starting. Something about legal disputes. A stolen opportunity." My stomach tightened. "Stolen?" Emily hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. "Ryan always said he was supposed to have that position. That someone," she stopped herself, "that you took something that wasn't yours." I exhaled through my nose. Typical. Ryan had always acted like the world owed him something. Like he was born entitled to success, while the rest of us were supposed to grovel at his feet. The idea that I had built something on my own, that I had succeeded without his permission, must have been unbearable for him. But still, this was more than jealousy. This was personal. "What do you know about the legal disputes?" I asked. Emily hesitated again, then shook her head. "Just whispers. And honestly, I never believed them. But if Ryan is bringing it up now..." She didn't have to finish the sentence. If Ryan was bringing it up now, it meant something had changed. I set my drink down, my jaw tightening. I need to talk to him. I found Ryan outside on the terrace, leaning against the railing with a drink in his hand. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Took you long enough," he mused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I didn't play the game. You said the company should have been yours." Ryan smirked, but his fingers tightened around the glass. "Did I?" "Drop the act," I said. "What do you think I stole from you?" His expression flickered just for a second. Then the smirk returned, more venomous this time. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" he said. "Just because you climbed out of the gutter?" I stayed silent. Ryan chuckled darkly. "You were always too stupid to see the big picture. Always so desperate to prove yourself that you never questioned why things worked out the way they did." A cold sensation slithered down my spine. "What the hell are you talking about?" Ryan turned to face me fully, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. "You really think your rise to the top was clean?" he asked. "That you did it all on your own?" I felt the first stirrings of unease. Because I had done it on my own, hadn't I? Ryan leaned in slightly. "There were deals, contracts, agreements, things that were supposed to be mine. But somehow, miraculously, they weren't. Someone pulled strings for you." I shook my head. "That's bullcrap." "Is it?" Ryan's grin widened. "Maybe you should dig a little deeper. Look into the original contracts that got your company off the ground. Because I guarantee you, if you do," his voice dropped to a whisper, "you won't like what you find." Something inside me twisted. I'd spent years fighting for everything I had. Every success, every late night, every risk, it had all been mine. I knew that, didn't I? Ryan stepped back, savoring the doubt he had planted. "This isn't over," he said, finishing his drink. "Not by a long shot." Then he walked away, leaving me standing there with a storm raging in my mind. The rest of the night blurred. Conversations, laughter, music, all of it faded into the background as I replayed Ryan's words over and over. Was he lying? Manipulating? Probably. But what if he wasn't? I had to know. The next morning, I made a call to my legal team. Told them to pull every document from the early days of my company. Every contract, every deal, every signature. I spent the rest of the day pacing, waiting. Then the email came. And when I opened the attachments, my blood ran cold. There it was. A signature on a contract I had never signed. A deal I had never agreed to. And a name I hadn't seen in years. My father's. My world tilted. My father had never supported my ambitions. He had called them foolish dreams. But now, staring at these papers, I realized the truth. He had helped me. Silently. Secretly. Illegally. And now, Ryan knew. I closed my laptop, my hands trembling. Because this wasn't just about my past. This was about who could destroy my future. The world feels different now. Off kilter. Like I was standing on a fault line, waiting for the ground to split beneath me. My father. I stared at the contract on my screen, my eyes burning from the harsh glow of the monitor. His signature was there, bold and undeniable. A legal agreement that had secured my company's first major deal, a deal I had believed was the result of my own sweat and sacrifice. But it wasn't. He had been pulling the strings. Silently. Secretly. Illegally. And now Ryan knew. I pushed back from my desk, running a hand through my hair. My mind raced through possibilities, scenarios. If this contract wasn't legitimate, if there was any proof that it had been forged, manipulated, or signed under false pretenses, then my company's foundation wasn't just cracked. It was compromised. And Ryan? He was waiting for the perfect moment to burn it all down. I hadn't spoken to my father in years. Not since I walked away from the expectations he had placed on me. He had never believed in me, never supported my dreams of building something for myself. But now, I wasn't sure what to believe. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over his contact, still saved under his full name. Not Dad, just his name. I exhaled sharply, then hit the dial. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then a click. His voice was as sharp as I remembered. I was wondering when you'd call. No hello. No small talk. Just straight to business. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of my desk. You signed a contract in my name. Silence. Then a slow, measured response. Yes. I shut my eyes for a brief moment. Why? A pause. Then, because you would have failed without it. My stomach twisted. I didn't need your help, I bit out. You think success is just about hard work? He said, his voice cold. Those deals are made because you earned them. You were young, naive. If I hadn't intervened, your company would have collapsed before it even began. My grip on the phone tightened. So you forged my name? Silence. Then a quiet. I did what I had to do. I let out a slow breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. Ryan knows. I got a reaction. A sharp inhale. A pause. Then you have a problem, my father said. I laughed bitterly. No, you have a problem. Because if this gets out, it's not just my company that's in trouble. It's you. My father's voice remained steady, unshaken. Then I suggest you fix it before that happens. And just like that, he hung up. I stared at the screen. Fix it. Like this was just another business deal. Like my entire career, my entire life, was just another transaction. But this wasn't business. This was war. And Ryan? He was about to make his first move. The email came the next morning. Short, simple, deadly. To company legal team from anonymous subject. Fraudulent contracts attached were copies of the documents I had seen the night before, the ones proving my father had interfered in my company's foundation. Ryan didn't waste time. I called my head of legal immediately. The moment he picked up, I cut to the chase. Damage control. Now, a sigh on the other end. It's bad. No sugarcoating. No reassurances. Just the truth. If these documents are legitimate, he continued, it means your company was built on fraudulent contracts. That could mean lawsuits, investigations. If anyone decides to dig deeper, he hesitated, it could be worse. I didn't need him to spell it out. Prison time. Financial ruin. Everything I'd built gone. I exhaled sharply. What are our options? A pause. We fight it. But you need to be prepared. If the board finds out before we get ahead of it, I know. I cut in. It's over. Silence. Then, finally a quiet, I'll do what I can. I ended the call, my fingers drumming against the desk. Ryan wanted to destroy me, but he had underestimated me. Because if he wanted a war, I was going to give him one. I needed leverage. Something to hit back with. So I did what I did best. I dug. Ryan had always been the golden boy. The one who got away with everything. But do people like him? They always had skeletons. And I was going to find them. I made another call. This time to an old contact. Someone who specialized in uncovering things people wanted buried. I need everything you can find on Ryan Lawson, I said. A chuckle. Are you finally making your move? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The contact just laughed again. Give me a few hours. I hung up, tension thrumming in my chest. Because if Ryan had played dirty, I was about to play dirtier. The call came faster than I expected. You're going to love this, my contact said. Ryan's got some secrets of his own. I leaned forward. Talk. Financial inconsistencies. Major ones. Looks like someone's been cooking the books at his company. My heartbeat picked up. How bad? A pause. Bad enough that if it gets out, he's the one looking at fraud charges. I smiled for the first time in hours. Leverage. I had leverage. I ended the call, exhaling slowly. Ryan thought he had me cornered. But he had forgotten one thing. I wasn't the same kid he used to push around. And I was about to remind him exactly who he was dealing with. Power wasn't about money or status. It wasn't about the fancy cars or the glass-walled corner offices. It was about control. And right now, Ryan thought he had it. He thought he could pull the strings, expose the past, and sit back while my empire burned. But he had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated me. Because while he had spent the last 24 hours gloating, thinking he had me trapped, I had been busy too. Digging, preparing, setting the stage. And now, it was time to return the favor. I didn't go to Ryan's office. I made him come to mine. A simple email. No THR odds. No warnings. Just a location and a time. Subject. We need to talk. Message. My office. Tonight. No context. No pleasantries. Just enough to make him wonder. To make him curious. And, as expected, Ryan couldn't resist. By the time he arrived, The city skyline was painted in deep blues and oranges. The office was empty except for me, sitting behind my desk, the weight of the night pressing in. Ryan strolled in like he owned the place. His confidence was still intact, but I saw it. The slight tension in his shoulders. The way his fingers twitched to his sides. He was here because he wanted to see the damage he'd done. He thought I was on the verge of breaking. Instead, I leaned back in my chair completely at ease. Took you long enough. Ryan smirked. You sounded desperate. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I slid a manila folder across the desk. Open it. He hesitated. Then, with an almost lazy air, he picked up the folder and flipped it open. The moment his eyes landed on the contents, his entire body stiffened. I watched it happen in real time, the slow unraveling, the realization. You've been a busy man, Ryan, I said casually, watching his knuckles turn white as he gripped the edges of the folder. Inside were detailed records of his financial fraud, the hidden accounts, the fake invoices, the missing money. Funny thing about people like you, I continued. You always think you're smarter than everyone else. That no one will notice when you start siphoning money, shifting numbers, padding accounts. Ryan's jaw clenched. You don't know what you're talking about. I smiled. I do, though. I tapped the folder. And so will the authorities. Unless, of course, we come to an agreement. He slammed the folder shut. You're bluffing. I shrugged. Am I? A long, suffocating silence. Ryan's breathing was heavier now. His mind racing, calculating, searching for a way out. I leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to bury those documents you sent about me. You're going to forget about the past, forget about my father, forget about whatever twisted revenge you think you deserve. I tilted my head. Or you can test me. See if I'm bluffing. And we'll find out together what happens when the feds start digging into your books. Ryan's face was unreadable, but his silence spoke volumes. Checkmate. He pushed back from the desk, eyes dark, furious, defeated. This isn't over, he muttered. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Yes, Ryan, it is. He stormed out without another word. I watched him go, feeling the weight of the moment settle around me. But this wasn't a relief, because even though I had won this round, I knew the truth. Ryan wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat. And if he couldn't take me down one way, he would find another. I stayed late that night, pacing my office, mind still buzzing. Something about this victory felt hollow, like I had missed something. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. We need to talk. It's about Ryan. It's urgent. A tight knot formed in my stomach. I grabbed my coat and left. Emily was waiting at a quiet cafe, tucked into the corner booth. Her fingers drummed anxiously against her coffee cup. She looked up as I slid into the seat across from her. What's going on? I asked. She hesitated. Ryan was too calm when he left her office. I frowned. He was furious. She shook her head. Not the way I expected. It was like he was still in control. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. I think he has something else planned, she whispered. I exhaled sharply. Already backed him into a corner. He has nothing left to use against me. Emily swallowed. Then, slowly, she pulled a USB drive from her pocket and slid it across the table. I wouldn't be so sure, she murmured. I stared at the small device, 1,000 questions forming in my mind. What is this? Emily looked around, as if afraid someone might be listening. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, proof that your father's signature wasn't the only one forged. My heart stopped. I picked up the drive, my fingers tightening around it. If Emily was right, then this wasn't just about my father anymore. This was bigger, much bigger. And Ryan? He had just made his final move. The USB drive sat in my palm like a ticking BMB, small, unassuming. But I knew whatever was inside had the power to shatter everything. Emily watched me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Fear. I swallowed hard and slid the drive into my pocket. Tell me everything. She hesitated. I don't know all of it. Just that Ryan has been sitting on this for a while. He's not just trying to ruin you. He's trying to bury you. I clenched my jaw. Then it's time I found out why. I stood. My hands were steady, but inside, the storm was coming. And I was ready. Back at my office, I locked the door and plugged in the USB. Files loaded. Documents. Scans. Bank statements. And then one file stood out. A contract. I clicked it open, and my entire world tilted, because there it was. Another signature. Mine. Except, I had never signed this. I read the fine print. An agreement tying me to a fraudulent transaction. A deal that never happened. A deal that, on paper, made it look like I had knowingly engaged in fraud. A deep, sharp breath. Ryan had planned this all along. He hadn't just wanted to expose my father's interference. He wanted to make sure I went down with him. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, my mind spinning. This was it. His endgame. And if I didn't act fast, it would work. Ryan thought he had me trapped, but he didn't realize I still had a move left to play. I picked up my phone and dialed. Make the call, I said. The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. Understood. Then I hung up. I wasn't just going to stop Ryan. I was going to end him. The next night, I arrived at the restaurant Ryan frequented. Private booths. Dim lighting. The perfect place to talk when you didn't want to be overheard. He was already waiting, his expression smug, like he had already won. I slid into the seat across from him. You seem tense, he mused, sipping his drink. Not handling the pressure well. I didn't react. I just pulled a folder from my briefcase and set it on the table. His smirk faltered. What is this? He asked. I leaned forward, my voice low. Your downfall. Ryan hesitated, then flipped it open. His eyes scanned the documents inside. Proof of his financial fraud, evidence of his attempts to manipulate contracts, records of his hidden accounts. His face paled. Where did you get this? He asked, voice tight. I smirked. You're not the only one who knows how to dig. His jaw clenched, but he still wasn't panicking. So what? You think you could just hand this over to the authorities and walk away? I leaned in. No, I think you're going to hand it over. Ryan's mask cracked. I continued, my voice calm, controlled. You're going to confess. Publicly. You're going to clear my name, withdraw every accusation, and admit that you manipulated those documents. Ryan scoffed. And why the hell would I do that? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. A recording. Playing. His voice. His words. Everything he had said to me at the reunion. That company should have been mine. You think your rise to the top was clean? Someone pulled strings for you. His face was drained of color. I smiled. I have more recordings. More evidence. More people willing to talk. I gestured to the folder. So here's how this ends. Either you confess, or I bury you so deep in legal hell that you won't see daylight for the next 20 years. A long silence. Then, Ryan's fingers curled into fists. I saw it. The moment he realized he had lost. This isn't over, he hissed. I tilted my head. Oh, Ryan, it is. The next morning, headlines exploded. Business executive Ryan Lawson implicated in financial fraud scandal. Shocking confession reveals years of illegal manipulation. Company CEO cleared of false allegations. Ryan had done exactly what I expected. He had taken the deal. He had confessed. And with that, he was finished. I stood in my office, watching the news unfold, my reflection staring back at me from the window. I had won, but it didn't feel like victory, because at the end of the day, I still knew the truth. My father had interfered in my success. I hadn't been the self-made man I thought I was. The truth was messy, ugly, but it was mine, and now I was finally free of it. I turned off the TV, picked up my phone, and deleted my father's contact. For good. Months later, I stood outside a familiar building, the venue where my high school reunion had been, where it had all started. I walked inside, past empty tables, past faded memories. Then, I pulled a single business card from my pocket. My card. I placed it on the bar, the same place Ryan had sneered at me that night. And I walked away, because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to Ryan, not to my father, not to anyone. I had already won, and this time it was mine.